Hello world. So in our last video we went over some of the elements of setting up animation for our raptor. We've got our idle and our walk, we've got some input set up, we've got the raptor import and all the animation, and now we're going to do the next part, which is adding our jump, our sit animation, as well as blending in our ability to kind of rotate in the direction that we're going so it feels really seamless. So let's add our jump in. So right now in our graph here, in our state machine, we have idle, walk, run. We need to be able to go to jump. So we can, if we're idling, we can jump, but also for walking or running, we should be able to jump too. But probably a little bit differently. Right now, let's just see if we can get that in there. So we'll add a new state called jump. And eventually we're going to break this up into jump start, then to the jump loop, and then jump end, but we'll get into that later. Right now we just want the basics. So I have jump here, and I want idle to be able to go into jump, but I also want walk, run to go into jump. This will be a real easy one to set up. So if we go back to our graph here, or excuse me, into our event graph here, we're going to add another part to this sequence. So we're going to add a pin, and we're going to get our movement component again. Our movement component stores something pretty cool, which is just called is falling. And all this does is tell us basically, are we in the air but not flying? So you can kind of hover over it and it'll tell you. And a lot of these, if you just hover over it, it'll tell you kind of what they do. All we need to do is take that, promote that to a variable, and call that falling. Basically, if we're not flying, but we're also in the air, we're probably falling. So, get that. Now, later we're going to decipher between actually falling and doing a jump. But the funny thing with falling and jumping is that most falling animations is just part of a jumping animation. So, we'll break up our jump a little bit later to kind of showcase how to do that correctly. But right now, let's go back into our state machine now that we have that falling bool. And here, we're going to open this up, the idle to jump. The only thing we need to check is, are we in the air? If we're in the air, we're probably jumping, and at the very least, we should do the jump animation anyways, at least until we break that up. And then we're going to go back, and then for our walk to run, same thing. Are we in the air? We always want to know, are we in the air or not? So those are set. I'm going to open up jump, and we're just going to drag in, see if I can get this over, our jump animation. Okay. And really quick, if you're in your idle, make sure if you click on this, just make sure that is set to looping. Always double check. We don't want our jump to loop, but this one already, I think, yeah, it already loops. So, but the next thing is, so if we're finished jumping, we want to go back into either running, or we want to go back into idle. And again, the thing that kind of bases that is, are we moving, right? So if we're moving, if we go from jump to moving, then we know we need to go into a run. But we also need to make sure that we're not still falling, or we're not still in the air. So first, you can drag off falling and do not bool. So are we not falling? And are we moving? If both of those are the case, then go into a run. I'm going to copy these. So we can go back, and for our jump to idle, we want to do the same thing, except we want to do not moving. So are we not falling, and are we not moving, right? And really quick here, I forgot to put that back, but we want to go from walk to run. Let's go back into idle here. So from walk, run to idle, as long as we're just not moving, we're always going to go back into that, okay? We always want to be able to be kind of interchangeable as best as we can. So let's save that. Let's test that out. So if I'm running and I hit spacebar, there's my jump. I'm not moving. My jump as well. But you notice that when I jump when I'm running, I get a bit of speed there. It kind of flings me forward into the air. Whereas if I'm not moving, I jump. I don't go anywhere. I don't get as much velocity there. And that's important. That's impacted by that blend space. So that's our idle, run, and jump. The last one we're going to add on to here is going to be our sit. If we are sitting, we're resting, basically. And again, we want to be able to go from idle to sit, and walk, run to sit. Obviously, we can't go from jump to sit because that's kind of silly. But we need to see if we're sitting now. So that's going to be our next thing to check. So first, let's just throw that animation in there. Going to get that. And this one's going to be a little bit different. We'll see about that. So we're going to get our sit animation. We don't want to loop it because it's just an animation of him sitting down. Right? And then to tell this that we're sitting, go back to our event graph. We're going to do another one. So let's add a pin. And we're going to do sitting. So we're going to say, let's get our character movement again. Actually, we don't even need that. We're going to get our character. Because remember that we added that sitting bool. Right? So we're just going to get our sitting bool that we added to our character earlier. And we're just going to promote that to a variable as well. Just leave that called sitting. Right? It's kind of getting a little chunky, so maybe I'll just drag that off of here actually instead of that. Yeah, let's kind of minimize our sequence a bit here. Move that one. So after we check falling, we'll check sitting. I think that's good. So move that down here. Kind of line that up a little bit. Oop. We're just going to call this setting. Okay. So now that we have that set, we can go back over here. We can go back to our state machine. So we go from idle to sitting. We need to say, are we sitting? That's all we need. If we're sitting, then, well, sit down. Right? Same with walk to run. Want to go here. Now, going from a run to a sit is kind of unrealistic. We're going to add that in there now, but we want to consider, too, kind of the realism of it. Like, how realistic do we want to go? Do we want to have it to where you can't sit down unless you're actively kind of checking if you're idle, or do you want to be able to just drop really quickly? So right now we're going to allow it to where you can drop really quickly, but we might come back here and say the only time that you can sit down is if you've stopped moving, okay? So keep that in mind. But right now we're just going to throw it in there. I'm just going to check if sitting. And again, we want to be able to go from sit to idle or walk run, but we're going to do this one a little bit differently. So if we go back into our animations here, we're going to add something on this called an AnimNotify. And that's basically when an animation is playing and it hits a certain point, it sends out a little notify saying, hey, I hit this point. And your animation blueprint can reference it and respond to that. So, for example, we're going to open up our sit, right? Let's give that a pause. We go to the very, very start of this. Okay, the very, very start of it. We right-click right here. We're going to add a notify. And that new notify is going to be called start sit. And this is just going to tell the blueprint, hey, we just started our sitting animation. We're going to need that in a minute here. We're also going to go to the end, right click, make sure you're clicking in this part right here in the track. New notify, end sit. Make sure you save that. And I'll show you why that's useful here. So we're going to go back over here to our animation blueprint. Right? Then go into the event graph. We're going to add a new event over here, and it's just going to show right up. So we're going to right click, and we're going to look up start sit, and you see that notify now shows up here. We're also going to get end sit. Okay? And we're going to add a couple more bools here. They're probably like little bit cleaner ways to go about this, but this is the simplest, okay? So you're going to add 2 new bools here. One is going to just be start sit. Gonna set that. And then the other one is going to be end sit. I'm gonna drag that in and set it. So when we notify end sit, it's going to tell the blueprint to toggle this on. When we notify start sit, it's going to toggle start sit on. And then we want to take start sit, make sure we're turning that off at the end here, because obviously if we've ended our sit, we're no longer in the process of sitting, right? And if we're starting a sit, well, obviously we're not ending a sit. So we want to kind of toggle these back and forth, right? Now this is what we're going to use to kind of make our sit to where it doesn't just immediately go from sitting to idle or whatever, and we know that we have finished the animation first. So we're actually going to go from sit. We're going to bring this over a little bit. We're going to get rid of that guy. To a stand state. Because we need a stand before we can just take off. And that'll give us a sense of danger. If we're sitting, if something's coming at us, we're going to need that half a second to stand up. And that's going to add that sense of danger that we need to be really careful about where we're choosing to rest, right? So to go from sit to stand, the only thing we really need for this is to just check if we're sitting, okay? If we've turned off our sitting, if we've toggled that, then we need to start standing up, right? Oops, wrong one. We want to do not bool. Okay, plug that in. And then from stand, we're going to go back into our idle. And then from there, if we want to go into walk, run, or whatever, that'll go from there. So for stand, it's a little bit different, and this is why we needed those animation notifies. We're going to drag that over there, and then for that, open that up, we need to do, did we start our sit? Okay? And I know this seems kind of funny at first, but I'll show you why in a minute. So remember, this notify fires off at the beginning of that animation sit. And what we're actually going to be playing is we're going to be taking that sit animation, we're going to be running it backwards. Because sitting and standing, it's basically the same animation, but standing is the sit animation running backwards. To do that, we just change our play rate over here from 1 to -1. That'll reverse it. So if we're opening this up, so if we're playing, if we're starting here for stand, we're actually going to fire this off at the end of the animation. That start sit is going to fire at the end of it. Which means that we can't actually go back into our idle, run, or whatever until we finish standing up. So this will only be toggled on. This start sit will only fire off as true when we get that notification at the end of our animation to stand up. So we can't just run off until we fully stood up. It gives us that sense of danger, right? So that's kind of the cycle. We go from idle, we can sit down. We go from sitting if we want to stand, but if we want to start going away or walking off or whatever after we stood up, we need to make sure we're done playing that animation, right? I don't think I connected that. There we go. Make sure that's nice and connected, okay? Alright, so one more thing really quick. We need to actually go back into our master character class because I just realized. For the sit, we need to be able to toggle this. And if we just release the button and turn off sitting, that means we got to hold sitting button down the whole time we're using it. We don't want that. We want to toggle. So we're actually going to do something called a flip-flop. I'm going to pull off of here and just do flip. And a flip-flop is literally that. It's like flipping a switch back and forth. If the switch is on, we turn it off. If it's off, we turn it on. That's all it does. I'm going to copy this. And for A, we're going to turn it on. And for B, we're just going to turn it off. So it's just every time we hit that button, it's going to go between A and B back and forth. And that way, it's a toggle. Okay? Oh, and we don't want it to be triggered, because again, that's just going to kind of bounce back and forth the moment that you hit it and then release it. It's going to flip both times. So we just want to go off of completed, which means we have completed hitting the button. That's it. So make sure that you change that to completed, flip-flop, back and forth between these two. And now we should be able to test it out, and it should hopefully work. Let's hit play. We can walk around, we can run, sprinting rather, and let's hit H. We sit down, we hit H again, we stand up, we hit H again. You notice how fast our stamina goes up, so let's stand up and let's walk around for a minute, okay? We're gonna burn that stamina down a good bit. It's going really fast, so sprinting, goes slower when we're walking. Alright, it's gonna really burn it out there. Okay. And then we're gonna hit. Now look how it's going up now. Now watch when I hit H. Look how much faster that stamina goes up from resting. See, goes up much faster. Now, if you'll notice, we can still move around when we're sitting. That's a bit of a problem. So we need to make sure we're locking our movement so that when we're sitting like this, that we're not able to just run around the place. Okay. So just to take care of that real quick, if we go back to our master class. We go to our movement here. We want to do a quick check to make sure that we're not sitting. So we don't want to be able to move at all if we're sitting. So before we do all this stuff, drag that over. We're just going to see, are we sitting? I'm going to get that. We're going to go if. And if we are sitting, we're not going to do any movement. If we are not sitting, so false, if we're not sitting, then we can move. Alright, so let's go ahead and throw that in there and test that out really quick. Alright, so moving around, I hit H to sit, and now I can rotate, but I can't move. And why don't we, let's see, we'll block off that rotate as well, and what we're going to do later is we're actually going to update the way the camera works by allowing us to kind of turn a little bit. So we want to be able to kind of look around a little bit when we're sitting down. But right now, let's just block it off completely. And then we'll customize this maybe in the next video here to where you can still kind of look around, just maybe with a limited range. Alright, so we're going to do the same thing. We're just going to copy this sitting branch. Throw that over here. Put it right there. And then connect that. Okay. So again, let's hold on. We connected that to the wrong one. There we go. Okay, so we can look around, move, we're moving. We sit down. I'm moving my mouse around, I'm moving my keys. I can't do anything. I have to stand up first, and now I can move around. You see how that works? Nice and smooth. Can't move. Hit H. Now I can move. Actually, you know, I went back over this. I took a minute away and then I came back and I was like, you know, screw it. Let's just go ahead and put in those camera adjustments so that we can kind of rotate the camera in a somewhat locked area when we're sitting down. So let's just do that really quick. So I made a function here. Again, click here, make a function, name it update sit camera. And over here, I have two inputs. You can just click here twice, give them a name, yaw, pitch, and float. Now, if you look here, we have add controller yaw input, and this is with the camera input, right? So when we're looking, we have add controller yaw input, that's the yaw input of the camera, and add controller pitch input. So one is left and right, one is up and down. We're going to take those same values, and we're going to kind of customize how this works. So in our update sit camera, let's open that up and I'm going to show you how this works. It's not hard to do and it'll give you a bit of control over that, just a little bit of camera range while you're sitting, because in the aisle you can't really look behind you when you're sitting, at least from what I've noticed, but you can look side to side and ahead a little bit. Things like that can rotate your camera around. It's just a bit limited. So let's go over this. We're going to add two variables called camera pitch and camera yaw. And we're going to do that at the end of our sitting. So whenever we toggle sitting, we're start to sit, right here, we're starting to sit. We're going to set these to 0. We're basically wiping them clean of whatever they previously were. And then we're going to use those variables. So we're going to take this, which always starts out at 0, because we just cleaned it out every time we sit down. And we're going to add whatever our yaw input is. So whatever that input is coming in whenever you rotate the camera during gameplay, we're going to add that. We're going to keep it in a range here. This is kind of like the clamp I showed you before, but it's a little bit different in that we are checking, is it in this range? So we're not clamping it, we're saying, is it within a range of -30, -30 to +30. You can adjust this how you want, but for me that kind of works well, and it kind of has a similar vibe to what the idle has. So if it's in range between -30 and 30, our yaw here, which is the left to right rotation, we're going to take the camera yaw and we're just going to add that number to it, and then we're setting it. So we're taking this yaw that's coming in from the camera input, we're adding that to the current yaw, and we're just setting it. And then we're going to take this, so you saw that here, where is it? So in the camera input, this is where we actually add it to cause that rotation. We're just kind of copying these two and putting them here. So we're still updating it in the same way, but we're first doing a check to make sure it's within the range of what we want the rotation for the camera to be. So this is our left to right, our yaw. After we do that, and this, so here, if we're outside of the range, we don't do anything with the yaw, we're going to just go ahead and check pitch instead. But either way, whether we do adjust our yaw or not, we're still going to check pitch. So then we take our pitch that's being fed in, we're going to bring it down over here, and we're going to do the exact same thing. We take our pitch, we're checking if our current pitch plus what's coming in, if it is within range, because we need to make sure this, what we have, plus what's coming in, if it's within range. And here, I want to do -10 and 10 because pitch is a bit more sensitive, and that's rotating up and down. So this is kind of a good range that I found, but you can tweak it if you want. But if it's in that range, if it's in a range that we're allowing for camera rotation, we're going to update it and just set that pitch, and then we're going to add it. And if it's not, we just don't do anything at all. So it's kind of the same thing, but here we're basically just kind of clamping it to a number for our pitch and our yaw to determine if maybe we're within range of that rotation that we want to have. So this is very, very simple. Basically just the same thing. This here for yaw, it's the exact same thing for down here with pitch, only this is -10 to +10, and this is -30 to +30. And I will show you how that looks in a few minutes, but first I want to get to the second blend space, and that's going to be for our look rotations. Alright, so let's go back into our animations folder here. We've got our walk blend space. We're going to make another one. What we're going to do is we're going to blend them together so that it kind of creates a somewhat seamless change when you're running forward versus running to the side, left, back, whatever, or just facing certain directions. Now you could do a 2D blend space, which kind of does a similar thing, but if we're taking these two one-dimensional blend spaces and then we're blending those together, that gives us a lot more control when we're adding more animations in the future. So if I do a jump animation and I'm leaning to the right, I want to kind of show my character kind of aiming for the right. And if I blend these two blend spaces together, it will give me a lot more control over things like that. And I'll show you how that works. So first, let's do a... So to do a 1D blend space, you can't just right-click it and then try to do it, because it always ends up... We've just got this one here, the two-dimensional. I don't think... I actually haven't looked. Oh, no, we do have 1D. Ignore me. So let's do a 1D. We're going to do BS for blend space. Raptor Tut. Look. Okay, let's open that up. Alright. So for here, the only thing that we really need is to see, okay, what's our rotation? Because if we're rotating to the right, we need to know which direction to look. If we're rotating to the left, same thing. And we don't want it to snap back and forth, or else his head's going to turn left and right no matter what. You know, if you're going straight, it's just going to take the tiniest bit of rotation. So we are going to kind of clean that up a bit, and I'll show you how to do that. So for the horizontal axis, which is this bar right here, see how it says none here? This right here, this is what we're going to change. So I take this and I set that to rotation. See, it changes down there. And then we can set the values here. So here it's 0 to 100. Well, I need to think about how rotation works. Now, he can rotate his head, maybe, let's say, I don't know, 90 degrees or even 180 degrees. But we actually don't need to know that much. We just need to know kind of where we want to max out the animation, which isn't really that far, at least for this particular character. And that might change for other ones that we do. Like maybe it might have a slower kind of rotation or what have you as far as animation goes. But right now, I found that negative 30 degrees by positive 30 degrees kind of works pretty well for this guy. For grid division, we only need 2 because, well, we've only got 2 animations we're really going to be bouncing between. Alright, so... Okay, so we're going to take our... turn right. Our turn right. Put that there. So, whenever it's at an axis value of 30, he's going to turn all the way right. And for our turn left, we're going to do the opposite side. I'll turn left. So right now you see the animation is kind of stuck between the two of them because it's, well, it's right in the middle. But as we move over, he's going to turn. Right? So that's all we need for that. Let's save it. And then we're going to go to our animation blueprint back over here, okay? So we have all of this. So this is all of our kind of movement stuff, right? Our movements. So if we go back to our anim graph right here, let's take the state machine. Let's rename this to movement, right? Because that's kind of what that all holds when we dragged it over a little bit. And this is kind of where the magic happens. So we're going to take this. We're going to do blend, there's a blend bone, layered blend bone, there we go. Layered blend per bone. I'm going to take that, let's actually drag it back here a little bit, because if we have any montages, we want to plug them in here. We might swap these out later, but let's just leave it like that for now. Okay, so we're going to plug that in. This is our base pose, right? And then we're going to take our blend space that we just made. We're going to plug that in here. Now you can look that we have a rotation that we're going to need to plug in, and I'll show you how to do that. But this is going to take whatever movement we're doing. So if it's our idle, or jump, walk, run, stand, whatever, it's going to take that, and then it's going to add our rotation to it. Which means if we're running, jumping, whatever, it's going to add that look rotation. So what we're going to do is we need to get this rotation. And that is going to be fed in here, and then it's going to take whatever the numbers we get. It's going to make sure it's clamped to between negative 30 and 30. And then whatever that number is, it's going to return the point along this axis that matches that rotation. So if I hold control and move my mouse, you'll see that, let's say I was fed in from here a rotation of, say, 10, right? So it's going to check on this axis for 10, which is right around here-ish. And that would be kind of the animation point. It's not going to look silly like this because the way we're blending it, but it can see, if I play just that point, it's just going to rotate just that much. Right, so it changes, it rotates based on how much we're turning. So to get this, we need to get our direction, right? We need to get the direction we're moving, and that's going to be a float just like that. Alright, and what we're going to do So we're gonna need, let's see. Well, this, if we open up this gives us our character velocity, or gets our velocity and all that stuff. But this returns it here as as our vector length. It returns as a float, right? So we're not going to use that to get velocity, but we do need velocity right here. And we know that comes from our character movement. So we go back over here. Well, we do have that saved. Under here, under component, character movement. So this is how we're going to determine what our turn rate is, or our look rate is, I should say, okay? So we get character movement. We get velocity, because again, we need to have it as a vector, which is just 3 elements. It's X, Y, Z, kind of, you know, perfect for getting your world space, right? We're gonna get velocity. Let's see, we're gonna get... We need to get the rotation of our actors. So where is our character's rotation at? We need to know how fast they're moving, but we also need to know what their rotation at. So get actor rotation. And then from these two, we're going to get the direction we're moving. So we're going to do, we're going to do calculate direction. We just plug in velocity there, plug in rotation there, and this will determine based on our velocity and our rotation what our turn rate is. So it's all in a word. Turn rate. Okay. And that's how we're getting that value, and that's going to be plugged into that rotation, that blend space. So let's comment this out nice and clean. We'll call this turn rate. And we'll make that black like everything else. And there we go. So we have that plugged in now. So let's go back to our graph here. Now we can plug in turn rate. So just take that, get it, plug that in, and then this will update it. And what will happen again is it blends whatever our movement is, whatever that may be, jump, running, whatever, and it's going to blend it with our turning so that it's nice and seamless, so that if we're running and we start turning right, it's going to show us turning right. If we're walking and turning left, it's going to show that. And it kind of works with how fast we're moving. And again, we're going to, as far as if we're idling or we're standing still or we're sitting and we're not moving at all, we're not going to get a value at all. It's going to be 0 because we have no velocity. We're just going to instead line that up with the camera look so that it's a little bit more, I guess, immersive, right? A little bit more like how the idle does. So let's do one more thing really quick, because again, we want to have really good, we want it to feel like when we're moving that we can't just, you know, turn on the dime and things like that. We need to make it feel a little bit more realistic, and when we're rotating and stuff like that, we also don't just want to immediately rotate to the right, because there's momentum, there's physics. We want it to feel like this character has weight, like he can't just immediately just fling himself to the right if he feels like it. So if we come over here, we're in our master character class, we come over here, we go down to, let me see where it is. Just want to show you a couple things that I want to make sure that you have checked in case you don't, because you might not. And honestly, I tinkered so much with this beforehand that I just want to make sure. I think it's under movement actually. Yeah, so under movement, right? Whenever we are doing, here we go. So rotation rate, character movement, rotation settings right here, okay? You want to change this. I have it at 260, which basically means that's how much it can kind of rotate. So it can turn on pretty tightly, because he's a raptor, we want it to turn pretty tightly. But not a full 360. We want it to feel a little realistic. 260 works for me. You might want to adjust that however you want, play with it, but that's how it works for me. We want to make sure that this is off, that you have orient rotation to movement on, and this will just, well, I mean, you can hover over these and it'll kind of tell you what they do, but it essentially orients the camera to the movement so that it kind of follows it correctly. And then I think that's really the only adjustments we really need to check. Let me just double check here. For your camera, so this little line here, that's our our spring arm. If you don't have this stuff set up, or if you don't have it the same as mine, you can just kind of copy what I have here. You notice also with my character that he's not quite in the, it's not his whole body that's in the collision, it's his upper body. And the reason why is because this is kind of the part that he leads with up here, right? He doesn't lead with his back end. So this is kind of where we want to center his, where his kind of movement comes from, right? So make sure that you have it lined up like that. You can look at my values here if you want. It's just like kind of real rough values. But yeah, that's what we want, his kind of upper body to be lined up with that capsule so that it when he's rotating, it's rotating at that front part. And then the rest of it just kind of follows along like it would be in real life. I have some adjustments to things like this. It's not a huge deal, but I wanted it just to kind of fit with him. And you can copy these values if you want. It's up to you. It's not a huge deal. And then, let's see. I think this is all just normal. Nothing fancy there. Spring arm holds the camera. It's pretty important, so make sure that you have use pawn control rotation checked, that all of these are checked. You can copy, here I have 400 for the target arm length. You can play with this if you want, you can use it if you want. Just make sure the camera's lined up behind him. Just, you know, make sure everything kind of matches here. I don't think I have any adjustments to the camera itself. Yeah, okay, so getting all that out of the way. Let's see, one more thing I think before we test this out. So back here in our animation blueprint, in the anim graph, here the blend weight says 1. We actually probably want to change that, and you might want to tweak this. Let's go with like either like a 0.8 or really up there. And this basically just tells us how much we want to have that overlap. So like a 0.5 would be half and half. For the, actually I think we want to, yeah, let's turn these off because we don't need to loop it. We only need to do it once, and we're actually not going to reset the animation because we want to control it completely by our turn rate. There's no reason to reset it after it runs it, otherwise it's just going to snap back and forth. So let's undo that. Let's go up to here, and then I think this is the last bit. We're going to go ahead and add which bones, because this isn't going to work unless we decide which bones it's using. So we want to do, let's do 2 of them here. So if I go to my skeleton here, okay, this is some skeleton mesh, we just go to the regular skeleton here. We go to my skeleton here. I have 2 main areas that are really doing a lot of the rotation. And that's going to be the neck up, where his head kind of rotates and where he's turning. And also his tail, right? Which kind of just, what if we want to just run that from the body itself, probably the pelvis. Here we go. So from the pelvis here. So we want to be able to, because if you look at this, that it kind of controls where his tail's at. So we want to remember, these are the bones that we really want to add these adjustments to. The pelvis and neck 1, right? Those are the ones that we want to be able to change. Okay. So if we go back over here, this should be the last thing that we need. So for the bone names that we want to change, neck 1, the depth is going to be a 1. This is, you know, this I could go in on the whole blend spaces and things. Maybe we'll touch on that later, but I would suggest looking into them and how this means. So, but for depth, we're just gonna go for 1, which means, like, yeah, we'll go into that some other time. It'll take a little bit to actually explain that in such a way that's fair. So, and then here the pelvis with also 1, right? And then we want to have mesh space rotation blend, which just basically means they're able to rotate in local space, which we want to have a little bit of that. And then for the curve, so the curve blend just kind of figures out just in what way it kind of smooths out. And for me, I tinkered around with these a bit, and normalized by weight feels the most smooth to me and a little bit the more natural. But I can't tell you all the technical stuff. I just know what I've played with that works for me, and that's kind of half of what this kind of stuff is. So, okay, so here's my baby. If I start running, well, actually my animations are backwards, so hold on. Okay, let's go to let's see our animation look. Right, because this is inverted actually. So we need to swap these around. So left should be over here. Right should be over there. Just drag those on over because it's inverted for this. So let's try that one more time. So now, if I look at that, if I'm leaning to the right when I move, I look that way and my tail moves. If I'm going left, it actually shows it. Now if I'm running, notice how he turns a bit more sharply. And look when I turn around. He actually, it looks familiar, doesn't it? He actually stops and kind of takes a second to turn. So you can see that he doesn't just turn on the dime. It actually feels a little more realistic, right? And we can really do a lot to control that. So let's make a few more adjustments here, since it's doing the rotation, but we want to kind of clean up and just make it a little bit more refined, a little bit better. So for our skeleton, we have the neck, body. The neck comes off of the body, so do the shoulders. And then our hips, and then our pelvis. And they all kind of come from this main skeleton here. The body holds those, so we've got body and pelvis as the main ones. So if we want to kind of be a little bit more all-encompassing, we could go with the neck for one, and instead of pelvis, let's do body, and let's actually do a depth of 4. This is, to be very simple, it's essentially expanding it out by 4 bones along the chain, and that blend is kind of decreasing in the strength of it as it goes down. So that will give us a little bit more kind of control. And again, you can kind of tweak these things, refine them. You can add more here but don't go too crazy on it, or else it's gonna start doing some really weird animation. But let's give that a shot. I think everything should be good and nice and cleaned up. Right, so yeah, I feel like we have a lot more turn now. We got a lot more control. You see when he jumps, his head rotates. And you can see that his jump, when I go in a certain direction, I jump. I can't just stop my jump. I need to kind of follow that velocity. Like I launched myself. I can't just stop midair, turn. That's where I'm going. And it feels just a bit more realistic like that. So, as you can see too, I love the turnaround too. That works really well. It feels very realistic. And of course, we got to do our sit down. So there he is sitting. You notice my camera won't let me go anywhere else. Up and down, left and right, that's the most I've got. Stand up, nice and smooth. Goes back to walking around. He can look, he can turn, he can jump. And it just feels a lot more realistic, right? So I think that we've got a good start here for animation. I think it's coming along really well. Looking at him growing up and everything, he's doing good. So yeah, I mean, you know, we're getting there. Alright, so I think that's it for this particular part of the tutorial. We've worked a lot on animations. They're a bit of work, but honestly, getting them cleaned up, it just adds so much to the game. And we have really been working hard to kind of mimic the Isle and kind of how they work. We've got a lot of stuff we're going to add on later. We're going to add on attacks and eating animations and all kinds of stuff like that. But this is a pretty good start, and this is something that is really, really easy to build on. The blend spaces in particular, using those blend spaces to kind of, you know, merge them together and using weights and things like that, it really gives you a lot of control versus using like a 2D blend space that just has, you know, I don't even want to get into it, but the 2D blend space is probably the most common that you're going to see in tutorials because it's very easy to do, but it just doesn't, in my humble opinion, have the kind of control that something like this does. So anyways, that said, that's going to be the end of this one. These are really long tutorials, but I really wanted to be detailed with them. we're going to start on, I can't remember. I'll leave comments in the description about what we're going to be doing next. I'm trying to do a video every, a couple days, but it really just depends on my availability. But at the very least, I'm going to do at least twice a week, minimum. Alright, so that's it. Like, comment, subscribe, and all that good stuff. If you have any questions, issues, anything like that, let me know. I'll keep working on the model and updating it. And, yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.